because the last few days I had a chance to think about Kwanzaa deeply, partly spurred on by Anna. And because I wrote a nice little speech, at least I thought it was nice. And Anna said, "But Gladys, so much of you is Kwanzaa. You told me about your dog, your child, all these other things." So for a moment, I want to start with Ashe. So I love the reminder because it reminds me that I'm literally the embodiment of Kwanzaa. And the principles are wonderful, which are called Nguzo Saba. But then I had to think deeply and reflect. And I need you just for a moment. If you don't like my story, blame Anna. But anyway, I need you to walk backwards a little bit with me and see me. And you guys probably know that I'm born and raised in Harlem in the 60s. And they were kind of turbulent times. My memories kind of kicked in around the 70s, as a little girl's memories would, and stuff. And I just remember, and I thought about my home. I'm in a 3-bedroom apartment, my mom with 7 kids. And I have remembered some of the debates and the arguments. If you could just see me as a black little girl in Harlem, while the world was talking about and looking at the Macy's parade and Santa and things like that, there was always an ongoing debate, because you might know my father was Muslim, my mother was Christian. But the ongoing debate was, from my father, there ain't no white Santa coming to Harlem, to the hood, to drop you any presents. So I'm listening to that, what I want to believe in Santa Claus. The other argument, she ain't taking no picture at Macy's with no white Santa. This is my world. Christianity is a white man's religion. So these things are going back and forth. And mind you, you have to think about the 70s. So the first 5 kids are David, Mark, Peter, Judy, Gladys, all very wonderful Christian names. And all of a sudden you'll find out in the 70s, my sister's name changed to Ayana, Abena, names out of Ghana. And how does this relate to Kwanzaa? Because it relates to the principle where I said, talk about naming ourselves. And I never really thought about it because we never had the ability, you saw Roots, your name is Toby, to name ourselves. I want you to understand why Kwanzaa has become so important to what we call ourselves as foundational Black Americans. Because we're not quite really African, right? And as far as I knew about Africa, we just got slaves from over there. That's where my history begins. And then I'm American, but then the whole world is telling me I'm not really part of this America. And as a child, it sort of goes over your head a little bit, but in between hearing arguments with my parents, I start to question. And then in 1970, Dr. Karanga came together, because people think it was like frivolous, but what was going on was the Watts riot. We just came out of riots ourselves in Harlem. It was really turbulent times. And now we're looking for a way to have dignity, self-respect, represent ourselves, think about neighborhoods, because we've always done the collective piece. And so the one about unity and collective work and responsibility comes together easy. Because you might not know, but we used to, when somebody couldn't pay their rent, we used to have rent parties. So you get in dancing and everybody put $1 or $5 in it so we could pay our rent. That's how we existed. It wasn't a lot of wealth. People didn't even know. We didn't have sanitation trucks coming to the community. Our garbage went out the backyard. And at that time, Harlem was flooded deliberately with drugs and a lot of toxic stuff. The factories and all the things that kept our men employed were closed down. AAA was partly responsible for having the highways split our communities. And a lot of people don't know that and run through it. It literally changed the way we lived. It changed the way my father would make money. My grandfather worked at the electric company his entire life. But to get employment for my father, for him to have dignity, because a man, it's, protect and provide. So this struggle is constantly a fierce battle in my home because my mother goes out to work. So this is how I remember Kwanzaa so fondly. I didn't even know how much I internalized it until this year. And I thought about it because I always thought this was really funny. I didn't even know I internalized it so much till I got my first dog that I begged for. And I got a white dog named that was an English setter, of all things, in Harlem. What a thing. So guess what I named my English setter? Because I said that's the only name that fit. That dog lived 16 years. Her name was Kwanzaa. Everybody in my community understood it. It was Kwanzaa. It fit appropriately. By the way, I had a rabbit named Right On. But it was a black rabbit. And then I thought about it because then I go through the Kwanzaa celebrations and I participate, but I didn't know how much I had absorbed until I had my firstborn child, my only child, sitting over here. And when I looked at her, I had to come up with a name. And the minute I saw it right off the tip of my tongue, my mother gave her the first name Kimara, which means great woman, and I gave her the Swahili name Nia from Kwanzaa, which means purpose, which just to tell you how much I embody this, because I think people think of it coming out of a celebration. No, it actually came out of survival. It came out of survival, and it came out of struggle. It came out of fierce determination to maintain our dignity in spaces that didn't always love us or want us. It came out of spaces where I thought everybody was poor. I thought everybody mostly had single moms, because this is what it does to us when we're ripped out of our factories and all these things. So Kwanzaa became not the alternative. Christmas still was there, but I looked at the stories in the books, and that's what helped me create Amara, the story about the light. And all of those things together meant that I carried it, I lived it. I thought about, even as I talked, Anna and I had this discussion, if you don't mind, we talked about, but you don't want to be too political and stuff. And I said I would have never been a Unitarian if I didn't want to be political on something. I don't want to be partisan, but my very body as a black woman in these spaces is political. So again, I love the fact, because I think it was a preemptor, because I didn't fit in Christianity for me, nor Islam. But you know what? When I walked in and I heard the principles of Universal Unitarian, it matched so much with who I am. Those principles that I embodied for so long. I came into a space and a place that would see me. And I loved it, and respect my worth and dignity. That's all I ever wanted. That's all my father wanted when he argued with my mother. That's all they wanted. They wanted me to see the world in a way that also reflected me. And that's why Kwanzaa became so powerful. No, it's not an African holiday. It is literally an African-owned here in America, but it brings in the diaspora. And I think about it because I didn't even know, because I was watching my granddaughter's face, and she just sat so still with amazement, mouth open, staring at it. And I thought about my daughter at her first Kwanzaa celebration, and it's amazing because you know what? The power of the drum. Let me hear it a little bit. Yes, that's what I'm talking about. Drums have been the communicators. It sent signals during slavery. How can I have Kwanzaa without drum beats and hearing that sound? It would ties me to my ancestors. The parties that we had in the 70s was all about the drum beat, was all about the dance, and the movements are so familiar to me. And the rhythms of the blues and everything that came after. We never lose that. But you can deny people their freedom. You could deny them their names. But you could never take away that spirit. And every time I hear that drum beat, something happens in my body and changes everything, and I always feel connected back to my ancestors. But I also remember that my struggle was different, and my survival was different. They had their own, but this, I love it so much because it's something that was created and it comes from me. It wasn't something sold to me by missionaries. It wasn't sold to me by TV. It wasn't given to me by Arab Muslims. This is my Kwanzaa. And in every day, I live that. So I just want to say I was really pretty amazed as I was telling the group back there. Did you know Kwanzaa, for the first time that I remember since the 70s, is embodying all 7 principles and Guza Saba? That has never happened. There's a reason. And if you listen closely to the title, it's pretty political. Raising the light in dimly lit times. Because when you look at me, from me in this body, whatever you may feel, we feel the dim light. But it's not news to us. And we dance and we play the drums and we talking about bringing in the dawn, because when my ancestors was on those fields picking cotton and they had their private dances, because you know what, we always knew, we always had faith, Imani. We always had that. We knew there was a purpose, and we knew in the morning that the morning will come, and we believed in it. And we worked together just like we did at the rent parties, just as we did when we dance and we feel rhythm is who I am. The drums is who I am. Kwanzaa, to see me, you see the embodiment of Kwanzaa. I am that. I am that. And I invite you today as Universal Unitarians to join me. Our very principles are principles of Kwanzaa. They all connect. And that's why it was so easy for me to walk into white spaces. And I still feel the connection. Because people can join under the principle of unity and faith. If you believe and walk with me today, if you can see me and see that little girl in Harlem, if you can see that in the midst of all she went through, then you see me. You see Kwanzaa. Ashe.